It's very easy to be average, right? When we grew 1-800-GOT-JUNK, which I was the chief operating officer, I took them from 14 employees to 3,100 employees in 6 years, from 2 million in revenue to 106 million in revenue in 6 years. We gave up no debt, we gave up no equity. If you want to have growth like that, which is doubling your revenue 6 years in a row, then you grow your people.
Hello and welcome to the Practical Leadership Podcast, where leaders share their tools and practical advice to make you a better leader today. My name is Max Kozlowski. I will be your host. And today we have a guest that is particularly special to me. His work has had a tremendous impact in the way I help my clients and is routinely called one of the best things I ever do with them. And we'll get into that a little bit later. He's known as the CEO Whisperer. He is the founder of the COO Alliance and the host of the Second in Command podcast. He's a world-class entrepreneur, consultant, coach, book author, speaker, PR expert, and I think he's a master marketer. He is recognized for his success growing 1-800-GOT-JUNK from 2 to 100 plus million in revenue. He's written best-selling books, including Double Double, Free PR, my favorite, Vivid Vision, and a few more. He's a mastermind behind exceptional fast-growing businesses, as well as worldwide major companies and brands. He's even been called to working with a monarch. He strikes a fine balance between deep understanding of ideas and concepts and practical advice that leads to consistent execution and ultimately amazing outcomes. I could keep drooling over his accomplishments, but I might get a bit jealous. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Cameron Herold. Cameron, it's great to have you on the podcast today.
Hey, Max, nice to see you again. Thank you for having me.
So Cameron, I always ask, what's something good, fun, happy that's been happening in your world. But today we want to know where you are and we want to learn a little bit about this nomadic journey you're on.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that I was called in to do some work with the monarchy. I'm actually sitting in the exact hotel that I stayed at when I was brought over to Qatar 7 years ago to work with the second in command of the Al Thani Group, which is the royal family's business holdings in Qatar. And I was over here doing some work with their second in command and trying to bring some of the systems and the mindsets and the methodologies that we use in North America. And I'm back over here right now with my wife just on vacation. But yeah, we sold everything over 2 years ago. Well, not really. Yeah, we sold everything over 2 years ago. We've been traveling full time now for 2 years. So we've done 41 countries in the last 2 years. Tomorrow we head to Qatar or to Dubai for a month.
And what's the plan? How long are you guys going to be doing that?
Well, 2 more years for sure. We have it planned out till the end of 2025, knowing our schedule. The year of 2025 will be much slower. Our plan then is to do about 7 or 8 cities over the course of 12 months. 2024 is still very rapid pace. We go to Dubai, and then we go to Norway, and then over to Japan, South Korea, Bali. That's all over the next 3 months or 3.5 months.
We could make a whole podcast on just the productivity and your systems needed to be able to be productive and be traveling so much.
Well, one is
our podcast is called Practical Leadership.
Yep.
Yeah. I bet there's a lot of intricacies and disciplines, right? I mean, just to be able to be on a podcast like today and, giving to your audience. And then next thing you know, you're on an adventure and then you have a meeting. So combining that is, it requires some structure and discipline, I bet.
Yeah, it requires a lot of time management, a lot of coordination with people and times and schedules, a lot of forethought and planning for me to be able to let my EA know where my calendar is so she can plan things around that. And then I think also just a lot of rigor and structure so that I can enjoy my days as well, because there's certain time zones when I could be working for 16 hours a day. And then there's other time zones where it's very hard to work with anybody in North America, as an example. So you just have to, plan. So this morning we did some really good sightseeing. We had a nice breakfast together. I went and got a workout in at the gym. I had a nice sauna. We hung out for a bit more. And then I started my day, and I'll work a good solid 6.5 hours today, but I still had a really enjoyable day at the same time. Or I think, there's ways that I could totally screw that up too.
I bet. So Cameron, let's get a little into the subject of leadership, because I believe that, if there's someone that has something to say about it, that's you. But I'm curious, when did you first learn about the concept or idea of leadership? When did it appear in your world?
It appeared when I was around, I'd say about 12 or 13 years old. I was about 10 or about 10 to 12. I was a cub in the scouting program, and I was the head cub. I was the leading cub in the troop. So I was starting to lead some other kids that were my age. Then I went into scouting, which was the next level, and I again became the head scout. So again, I was leading people there. And then I got into student government in high school, and I ended up on the student council. I ended up as the top 5 people in the school of 1,400 kids, and I was, on the executive of leading kids there. And then when I was in university, in second year university, I had my first operational company. I was 20 years old and I had 12 full-time employees. So again, I was at a very young age leading people, but it started about 10 years before that when I was around 10 or 12 years old.
And was there a concept of leadership, or were you just leading in like doing it? Or was
There
the
wasn't
subject discussed or principles explained?
No,
Like,
until I was well, yeah, there was a little bit of leading that was coached through the scouting program. We were given a little bit of leading there, but it was just more the concept that I had to lead others, and it wasn't gonna come from authority. These were my friends or peers, so I had to learn how to influence them and to lead them and subtly move them in the right direction on things without telling them what to do. When I moved into this, I was running a franchise when I was 20 years old in a house painting industry. I definitely got a lot of coaching and guidance then around leadership. And then I got heavily, heavily trained around things like situational leadership, coaching, delegation, managing conflict, one-on-one coaching meetings, where I classroom teaching. So I got a lot of skill development around, leading adults.
so you go from, leading your peers, you could call them children, teenagers, you start your own business, and then you get a lot of training, and then you're teaching adults. I'm very curious. So what's the difference between leading, children, teenagers, and leading adults?
Not much. I think at the end of the day, we're all adults trapped in child's bodies. We're all 15-year-olds trapped inside this adult's body, right? And I think in many ways, adults still operate with the same triggers, the same incentives and motivations that their 15-year-old selves did. So it's understanding that person and that we're all humans, that we're all struggling, that we're all real, that we all have frustrations, that you have become very mindful of that when I'm leading people, regardless of their age, right? That again, we're just all these 15-year-olds trapped in adult bodies. And then
So let
there's also a lot around situational leadership where you don't lead one person the same way on all of the different projects that they're working on. You have to adapt your leadership style on a situation by situation basis. So I've done a lot of work, a lot of training. In fact, I've even created some training programs around situational leadership for entrepreneurs. It's really not taught anywhere, but that's a core skill that good leaders have to be able to do is adapt their style on a situation by situation basis and on a person by person basis.
I know the audience is definitely going to want us to go into that one. But
Mhm.
before I do, I think I'm 100% with you, right? I do believe, I call it that we're still cavemen and we're an underdeveloped species. So tell me a little bit about that. Like, what are some of the things that you understand that you want other people to understand to really? Because at the end of the day, we're working with people. We need to understand them.
Yeah,
How do you
one
what do you understand about humans that everybody else needs to understand?
one is that most humans still feed off of some element of praise and gratitude, right? Showing the love bombing them, saying thank you for the work that they're doing. At the end of the day, we're all just doing this work to make money to be able to pay for all of the things that we have in our life. And at the same time, we're all going through similar struggles as humans. So it's being cognizant that these employees that are working for you and with you are all struggling with something in their day to day lives, right? With their family, with their spouse, with money, with their children, with their health, whatever. We're all just struggling and walking each other home. So being mindful of that. And then second, just being very mindful that, people like to be thanked and like to be praised for what they're doing well, that we still have that child inside of us that wants to get the ribbon that says well done. And I think if we operate like entrepreneurs where we keep showing them stuff that's broken, we keep pointing out all the areas of improvement, we keep setting more goals and driving the company forward and we don't celebrate all the little wins, at some point we just frustrate and beat people up where they don't feel as thanked. It's one of my big rules that in business, the number one metric for every company is how happy are my employees, right? It's the employee net promoter score that matters more than anything, more than revenue, more than profit, more than customer engagement, is how happy are my employees. And if I'm very mindful about taking care of them and making sure that they're happy, they take care of my customers, which makes my customers happy, and I make more profit and I can charge whatever I want because I've got all these super happy customers and employees that aren't going anywhere.
I absolutely love that. So much to talk about there. It reminds me of Napoleon, where he said that, with enough ribbon, he could conquer the world. But at some point, we forgot about all of that. Like, what happened? Why did that go away?
I don't think I don't think we did. I think 5 to 10% of the companies never forgot that and are absolute. I think what's happened, unfortunately, is average. So it's hard to build a fantastic company or a great company. It's very easy to build an average company. And I think what's happened is that most people have just become average and they're focusing on so many important things that they forget about the one critical thing, right? They forget about what's so important is the people. And then we need to have something happen in our lives where we remember, right? We have a death in the family or a kid of our own who's struggling or something that wakes us up that gets us to be a little more mindful. COVID, frankly, did that, right? COVID showed us how lonely people were because all of a sudden everyone was lonely. COVID showed us how separated we were because we were forced to be separate, right? COVID showed us that just seeing a kid walk through somebody's background in Zoom, which 4 years ago would have driven us all crazy, now it's just normal. So I think we're opening up back to that again. But I think the good companies have always known, right? The good companies have never ever lost sight of that.
That's a really good point. So what are some ways that we could be aware of this without having to have, this life-changing incident, life
Well,
or
yeah,
catastrophe or something that reminds us?
one is to make sure that one of your rocks, one of your, big quarterly goals is your employee net promoter score, right? So how happy are my employees right now? How happy would I like them to be in 3 months and 6 months? And what are the things that we as a company are going to do to make our employees more happy, right? Is it more coaching? Is it more mentoring? Is it more face time with them? Is it an open door policy? Is it more flex time? Is it growing their confidence? Is it saying thank you? What are all the things that we can do to make them more happy? And more often than not, you could come up with 9 things that don't involve any money. It's not pay them more. Most employees aren't asking, once they hit a base level of pay, they're not asking to be paid more to be happier. They've already hit that level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. But what can you deliver at the next 4 levels of Maslow's hierarchy of needs? That's what companies have to rally around.
Okay, we're going to have to get a little bit into those levels so everybody understands them. It reminds me of the idea that children spell love time, right? Because everything you mentioned was like giving them time, giving the team members time, giving them time, giving them time. And then we go back
Yep.
to the idea that we're all like, teenagers trapped in adults' bodies.
Yep.
So is there a large relationship between the time you feed into them and how they feel?
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why I like companies to have their employees do the love languages so that we understand how each person likes to be appreciated and loved. Is it quality time? Is it physical touch, like a pat on the back or a hug once in a while? Is it, acts of service where you help them out with things? Is it gifts like a free lunch or a free coffee once in a while to say thanks for doing a project? Is it, words of affirmation, like in front of the group saying, hey, congrats to Bobby for crushing a project? Like, what are the ways that we as leaders need to show love and gratitude to people? And we need to do it in the way that they like to be received, right? If you just buy everybody a coffee, well, the guy who wants acts of service and quality time did not feel loved, right? Or the one who wants words of affirmation, if you're like, oh, but he knows I love him. Yeah, he needs to hear it constantly because he feeds off of words of affirmation. So it's just understanding those things inside of a business and how to lead differently.
And then how do you find this out? Right? How does a leader, how does a
Ask them.
manager figure
Ask them.
this out for each individual?
Yeah, ask them. what do you like how do you like to be praised? How do you like to be shown, appreciation? How do you like to be helped? What makes you tick? What pisses you off? What frustrates you? It's trying to understand them. And as a leader, it means we need to slow down and do less and lead more, do less and ask more questions, do less and be more curious. It means really getting to understand our employees, not just their birthday and their dog's name, but like really know them. And I think that's where the true leaders realize that they can only manage, 5 to 6 full-time direct reports so that they have time to know their people. If you're constantly running from project to project and task to task and fire to fire and, employee to employee, then you're not spending any time leading people at all. You're merely just showing up and kind of, you know, scrambling.
And chances are you're busy with stuff that you shouldn't be handling in the first place, right?
Absolutely.
That there should be somebody
Yeah.
else taking care of.
It's that old adage of if you only had 2 hours a day, right? If you were going to be on kidney dialysis and you could only show up at work 2 hours a day, what would you be doing in those 2 hours a day? Well, I would be making sure that my employees are aligned. I would be helping to remove obstacles. I'd be helping to fire them up with energy. I'd be helping to grow their confidence and grow their skills and remove obstacles. I wouldn't be doing work. I'd be delegating all of my work to them and then growing them. One of my biggest pet peeves in the last couple of years has been leaders who have said, and this has happened with my COO Alliance members or with clients that are in my group coaching program, is I don't have time to coach somebody. Well, you don't have time not to coach them, right? The reality is that if you spend the time coaching them, they're going to grow. The other one is when leaders say, "Oh, I can't delegate that to someone because they don't have the skills." Okay, well, delegate it to them and grow their skills. Or I don't have anybody that feels like they can do it. Well, delegate it to them and grow their confidence. But get everything off your plate and grow your people's skills and confidence, and that's what really scales up the company.
It
So
it sounds it sounds simple enough, right? Like, hey, get rid of the stuff and give it to the right people. But then things are moving so fast that they find that they can't do it. Now, one of the things that I read about, the Google CEO founders, which kind of goes against this one, and I'd like to get your opinion on it, is when they said that, look, if you needed speed, do it yourself, right? Like you need to get it done, just do it yourself. And that's kind of how they started the company, with this idea that just tackle it yourself. What's right about that and what's wrong about that?
yeah, in the early stages of growing a company, you need to have a bunch of people that are radically self-reliant, that are jack of all trades, master of none, that can just get shit done with less people faster until you're able to build out a management team and a leadership team. But for sure, in the early days, you're hiring people that can just get stuff done. But then at some point, you have too much stuff to be able to do it. Now the responsibility is to get results through others, right? How do we actually scale up the organization and get results through other people? It's by growing their skills and growing their confidence. It's not by just doing it ourselves because you don't have enough time to do it all.
And we go and that kind of leads us into the situational conversation, because what you needed to do to get to a certain level is definitely not what you need to do to get you to the next level. So early
Right.
on, sure, get everything done. But if you don't graduate from that and move on to a different approach to work, you're going to get stuck, right?
It, it's one of my
Dude,
big pet peeves, like one or not pet peeves, but there's some really good systems out there for helping companies grow. One of them, which you're very familiar with and you work with clients on, is scaling up. But none of the systems in scaling up teach things like coaching and situational leadership and running one-on-one meetings. We don't give them the executive functioning skills to lead people. We're giving them the systems to run the company through, but we're not giving them the systems to grow people. So I'll give you a real crash course on situational leadership. It's taking a look at each individual project that your direct reports have on their plates and asking yourself on each project, what's their skill level and what's their confidence level on managing that project? And on the skill level, do they have no skill, some skill, or high skill, right? So give them a 0, 1, or 2, 0 for no skill, 1 for some skill, 2 for high skill. And then the next part is how much confidence do they have in themselves and their skills to do it? And then give them a confidence level of 0, 1, or 2. Based on those two things, you can switch your style from either telling them what to do to telling them what to do and why we do it that way, or having them come to you with a plan of what they're going to do and coaching them and praising them or just delegating the project and knowing you don't need to get involved at all. Right? When our child is 1 year old and we're teaching them how to walk, we cheer them on every step they're making. And then after about 3 or 4 days or 3 or 4 weeks of them making steps, we no longer cheer them on. Like I don't turn to my 20-year-old going, "Gosh, you're doing so great walking." He'd be like, "Dude, what are you doing?" But when he was 1 year old, I praised the heck out of him when he was walking. I also don't show my 1 or my 20-year-old how to pour the orange juice, but for the first 3 times he poured orange juice, I was micromanaging him because he needed to be micromanaged. So the style that we have as parenting, we naturally adapt. We don't learn, sadly, how to adapt that leadership style when we're growing companies. And that's one of the probably 2 or 3 of the core modules in my Invest in Your Leaders course are around that so people can learn how to adapt their style.
I love that because it gives you a very specific framework, right? And there's a couple of questions. I mean, just asking those two questions. So again, one is their level of skill, their level of confidence, which will then tell you how you have to coach them and help them on that project.
Yeah, and it's not even confidence, it's more commitment, right? And partial commitment is partially tied up to confidence, it's partially tied up to are they overwhelmed? Do they have too much on their plate? So it's more commitment and skill than confidence and skill. But it's really looking at those two things. And you could have a brand new, very senior, very fantastic COO who you've just hired. They could be the most amazing second in command you're going to bring into your company. But because they're new, their confidence is a little shaking, right? They might have the skills, but their confidence is because they're new. They don't want to screw up. They're not quite sure. They haven't worked with a team yet, right? But after 6 months or 9 months, their confidence is super high and their skill is a little high. So you're not going to lead people the same way over every single situation, right? The same situation after time is going to be a different style that you're going to use. And I have no idea why all these background effects are happening over Zoom.
I didn't know either, but definitely a change of pace. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So adapting to the evolving skill set, performance expectations of your team members, but with continuing with the praise, with the support, and then understanding them. So you don't understand them once and then leave. You're consistently understanding what their priorities are, how they are tackling them, and you're helping. Well, you're helping yourself coach them better by understanding where they stand on each of these fronts.
Well, and
And
it's coaching is only one of the 4 styles. So there's a delegating style, there's a problem solving style, there's a coaching style, and then there's like the full delegation. So there's in the early stage, you're telling them exactly what to do. There's no coaching involved whatsoever. They're not ready to be coached. They just need to be told exactly, specifically, step by step what to do. The next style is more the problem solving style. You're going to show them what to do and you're going to explain why we do it that way so that then you can actually they can start to understand the why behind the what. The third style is more of the coaching style where you let them work on it, you give them some support, you give them some praise, you help out if they need to. The fourth style is more delegation, where you're letting them just run with it because you know that if they specifically understand the output needed with the little amount of time and money to be spent, they can nail it, right? So coaching is one aspect of leadership, but it's not all of leadership. And that's important to understand for
I
leaders
think
is that there's lots of times that people don't need to be coached whatsoever. They need to be told exactly what to do.
yes, exactly the point, right? We have to understand what they need and how to best help them and serve them. And there's so
And
much
a-
talk
and that
about
even
coaching that
yeah, let me
sometimes
flip
it's not the right thing.
right. Let me flip that on the opposite direction. If I like all of the clients that I've coached, and I've worked with about 150 CEOs, typically 50 to 500 employees, I know nothing about their industry. Like I coached a guy who built a massive shipping company. I coached him from 40 employees up to 700. I know nothing about his industry because I wasn't coaching him on what he did. I was coaching them on how they did it. Right. So on one area situationally, he had very high skill, super high commitments, like stay the fuck out of his way. On other areas, he didn't have any skill or commitment, so I was coaching him or delegating. You know what I'm saying? It was a different style of leading, and that's what leaders have to get good at, but we tend not to. What we tend to do is focus on, "Oh, I run a marketing agency, I should obsess about marketing," or "I run a roofing company, I should be the best at roofing." That's only one aspect of what you do. Growing people is often much more important than the product or service that we're actually delivering.
I agree. And if you don't get to the stage where your focus is on growing people, you get stuck, right?
Yeah,
And we
you'll
see
never
that,
scale.
all the time. Or even worse, they outgrow what they can cover and end up collapsing and contracting and going back to, well, maybe we should just stay small because growing this doesn't work out. It's not that it
Yeah,
doesn't work out. It's
or they lose good people because the people get frustrated because they're being micromanaged, or worse at times, too laissez-faire, where somebody's just dumping stuff on their laps and they have no idea how to do it and they get frustrated and worried. And then the leader gets pissed off because they don't get the results, but it's because the leader doesn't know how to delegate and coach and teach people. So of course you're not going to get the result you're after.
So let me ask you about this. So I like the idea of situational leadership, right? We've got to be adapting to different situations. But are there any elements that you consistently see at different sizes of organization or complexities of organization? So for example, couple of million in revenue business versus, couple of tens
Sure.
of million. Are there any
Yeah.
key points where you're like, whoa, here's where you really need to start shifting gears?
Yeah, I call it the ones and the threes. So a company that's doing $1 million in revenue to 3 million to 10 million to 30 million to 100 million, there's definite transitions. At $1 million in revenue, you're starting to hire your first few employees that you're able to delegate work to. So as a leader, you have to be good at delegating, at coaching, at running one-on-one meetings, at time management, at project management, at praising people. When you go to 3 million, you probably have your first management team and you have a group of 5 or 6 people that are managing everyone for you. So now you have to be good at collaboration, at building consensus, at running meetings, at doing planning, at, again, situational leadership. You have to be good at managing conflict, and you have to be good at delegating, right? When you go to 10 million in revenue, you've now got enough people in the organization that you don't even know people. So you have to be good at making sure that your people know their people, that your people are caring about people, that you're focusing on the right metrics, that you are focusing on the critical few things. And what happens from the 3 million to 10 million is every early stage manager tends to think that the answer to every problem is hire more people, and it's never the answer to the problem. Most early stage managers are bad at delegating, they're bad at optimization, they're bad at automation, they're bad at getting stuff done through more people, they're bad at saying no. So you as a leader have to get good at teaching them those things. Otherwise, you end up getting all this bloat and adding too many people and too much complexity into what should still be a simple company. When you get to 30 million in revenue, you've tended to hire your first leadership team, a group of people that can actually manage others, have led people before, they've led companies before. Now you're no longer teaching them what to do. You're working with them to make sure that they're aligned, communicating, removing obstacles, helping them to recruit, but you're not delegating much at all. And then at the 100 million mark, you're dealing with company politics, strategy, legal, compliance, that kind of stuff.
Thank you for illustrating that, right? There's a clear change of pace and change of tone into what you have to be focused on and what
Yeah,
skill set you need to develop. Because again, at
right. The
first you got to
skills.
know the trade, and then later on you're like way separated from the actual delivery of your product or service.
Yeah, in the early days, when you've got 10 employees, you know every person, you know what they do, you know what they're screwing up. When you got 100 employees, there's people working for you, you don't even know their name. You can see a picture of somebody at 300 employees, you've got people working for you. Not only do you not know their name, you don't even know what business area they're in. So leading those kinds of people in that kind of a company, the CEO, the COO, the leadership team have to keep working on their skills. Again, it's why my Invest in Your Leaders course and the COO Alliance are so powerful, is those are platforms for people to grow their skills in addition to what they're using, like Scaling Up or Traction or 3Hag or any of the other systems that are out there. Skill development that we need at the leadership team level is just different. It's an add-on.
So let's talk about this really painful subject for many. It's this idea that you have a team that has been really good to you, really kind to you, really helpful to help you move your company along. But you get to a point where they just didn't develop enough, and now they're actually keeping the company from taking that next level or next stage. So there's
Yeah.
two conversations. and I know you're very familiar with both. So one is, how do you make sure that doesn't happen, right? How do you make sure that the team is evolving as quickly as the
Sure.
organization so they don't become obsolete? And number two, what do you do when they are in fact obsolete?
Yeah. So the first part is you always hire people that like to learn and want to learn. You hire self-driven learners because they're going to chase the carrot on their own. They're going to be listening to podcasts and reading books and working on skill development. You want people who come to you asking for courses that you can pay for them to take more courses. You want them coming in and sharing what they learned over the weekend with people. You want them playing with all the different AI tools that exist. So you're looking to hire those people. Secondly, is you as a company should put in place at minimum 1% of your revenue towards growing people's skill sets. I think that every employee, you should dedicate 1% of their annual salary or $750, whatever is greater. So if you've got a $200,000 person, at least $2,000 a year on skill development for them. What I do is I take the entire payroll of the company, I allocate 1% of that, and I make sure that I have a training program to grow people's skills. So you could hire a speaker to come in and speak to a group about something like situational leadership for an hour, pay the person 5 grand, but you've trained 50 people. That's $100 per person. It's a rounding error. So the key is to establish a baseline of money that you're going to allocate to it. And then third is a mindset to remember that if the company grows and doubles in size, the skills of your people have to double in size as well. So
Okay.
just
So
remembering that.
that's how you're trying to prevent this
Right.
very difficult, painful situation where someone that was helpful
Getting
is not helpful
Getting rid
anymore.
of the people who don't grow. So I use a system that Jack Welch created, which is every 6 months, I do a top grading of all my team. And I take a look at their skills and their cultural fit, and I rate them on a matrix. So on a scale of 1 through 10 on skills, are they low skills or high skills? Like skills and results really on that axis. And then on the bottom level, it's the y-axis or the x-axis, it's their culture fit. So are they a bad culture fit or very high on the culture core values fit? And then you just start to recognize which people need coaching and which people have to be pushed out of the organization. Anyone who is not a good culture fit, regardless of the results they're getting, you have to fire them. So if somebody is a toxic, negative energy, not living the core values, regardless of how well they're doing on results, you have to fire them. The people that are not getting results, if they're good culture fit, then you grow them. You give them the skills. You keep helping them adapt. And you make sure that they understand that you're not working on their skills because they're broken. You're working on the skills because the company is growing and they need to keep pace with it. And you would fire them if you didn't care about them. So you care about them, which is why you're growing their skills, right? It's just staying ahead. But at some point, if you know the person is not going to be able to grow, you have to make the cuts, right? If at some point when you have doubt, you have no doubt.
Yeah. And I think that's the most difficult point in an entrepreneur's life, right? Recognizing that the people that have been helpful won't help them get to the next level. So let's talk just a little bit about how
Especially
you,
especially when you're a very empathetic, caring leader, right? If you're a leader who really cares about people and really cares about employee net promoter score, it's tough to make those tough decisions. But I like to think of it this way. My A players are the racehorses. My B players are the workhorses. The C players should go to the glue factory. What I should be doing is spending my horses on my workhorse racehorses on my workhorses and not spending all my time with the C players that suck up all of our energy. So what happens is because we're caring about the underperformer, our good people don't feel cared for. We're caring for the wrong person.
yeah, we understand the principle, right? And I work with really good people that really care about people. So we face this problem consistently. I'm wondering how do you go about the actual execution of letting someone go, someone that has been good at their job, someone that's been a good fit, but they aren't anymore. Like most difficult situation, I think.
I think of them as if I'm firing my sister or my mother. And I say, I'm sorry. I really love you. It's just not working out anymore. Or I'm sorry, I really care about you, but it's just not working out anymore. And then it's either because of results or because of the core values. I get into no further discussion than that whatsoever. So remember when you were 20 years old and you went to a bar and the bouncer said, I'm sorry, you can't come in, you're wearing running shoes. He said, yeah, but my friends are inside. I'm sorry, you can't come in, you're wearing running shoes. I'm only going to be in for a half hour. I'm sorry, you can't go in, you're wearing running shoes. My best friend owns the bar. I'm sorry, you can't come in, you're wearing running shoes. They didn't change their message. It was just the same thing until we finally said, oh, fuck it, and we walk away. When you're firing somebody, all you can say is, I'm so sorry this is happening, but we're just not getting the results we need anymore. But I'm sorry this is happening, but we're just not getting the results we need anymore. You don't veer off of that message, but you do it in a caring, empathetic way.
So here's another question. Do you have to wait until they don't deliver the results that you want? Because sometimes they are delivering the results that are needed today, but you know they won't be able to deliver the results that you need tomorrow.
Yeah, so that's in a growth company where you know that they're not going to be able to get you there. And at that point, you're sitting down and saying, hey, based on what we're looking for in the next 12 months, we know that you're not going to be able to do this. Here's the scorecard of what we're looking for, and you don't meet that. That's a tougher situation because then you're letting somebody go for where you're going, not for what they've done. But
Yeah.
that's just sitting down and
And that's
saying,
one we face all the time.
that that's a tough one. That's only really faced by very high growth companies. And that is literally by sitting down and saying, it is because of what's on our path over the next 12 months. And we know you don't have the skills to do that based on what we've seen now. That's all you can really say.
And if they're a good fit, do you try to find them a position inside the organization
Yeah.
somewhere where they can fit? How hard do you try to
Well, as
place
Jim
them
as Jim
versus just
as Jim Collins said, it's about getting the right people on the bus, the wrong people off the bus, and everybody in the right seats. So when you have a really good high values person who's a great, culture fit and really doing well, getting results, but they're not gonna be able to do that next role, yeah, try to find another seat for them if you can. Because you'd rather keep those good people that have really done a good job somewhere if you can find place. But that's
all
comes
right?
down to, like, the forecasting and the budgeting for the company where you know what your staffing plan looks like in 12 months and 24 months, and you know that you're gonna be able to grow them into something.
I completely agree, right? Being able to see into the future allows you to prepare better. I gotta
Yeah.
I gotta shift gears. My audience would kill me if I didn't talk to you about vivid vision, right? I preach it, I train it, I use it. That's the one that a lot of my clients say, hey, this is one of the most important things we've ever done with you. And I always say, really, out of everything, that's it. But it is that critical. So can you tell us a little bit about, I mean, the book, the inspiration, why you believe it's so critical and important, in some like tips and advice on how to make the most out of it?
I think it's as important as the content in my Invest in Your Leaders course. I think the Invest in Your Leaders course is probably the most impactful content I've ever written, but without a vivid vision, you could have all the best employees with all the best skills, all working really hard, going in the wrong direction. That's not helpful. Vivid vision allows every employee, every customer, every supplier, every potential employee, it allows everyone to see what you can see as the entrepreneur. It allows everyone to literally be on the same page so that they're completely aligned, so that they're making the decisions that you would be making as the entrepreneur. That's why it's so powerful. And the Vivid Vision is a 4 or 5 page written description of what your company looks like, acts like, and feels like in the future. That's why it's so important.
Yeah. I really explain it as well as saying, look, in the old days, you would have a mantra for your company. Then you had a mission statement. Then you had whatever you want to call it. But ultimately, it's just not clear enough. It's not detailed enough. It doesn't go
Yeah.
deep enough. So trying to think that your whole team can know where we're going and what we're trying to build out of like one line or one paragraph or one statement doesn't work. But
Right,
when you paint this whole
it doesn't
picture,
explain what your customer service is like. It doesn't explain what your employee meetings are like. It doesn't explain what your onboarding is like. It doesn't explain how you care about people. It doesn't explain how you live core values. It doesn't explain your meeting rhythms. It doesn't explain your use of data. There's way too much that's still in the entrepreneur's head. And if we write it down and we codify it as that 4 or 5 page vivid vision, now everyone can see what you can see.
absolutely. And then they can make decisions that are consistent with that vision. I can't tell you how many times people have had difficult decisions to say, but hey, it's on the vivid vision, right? It's on the document. That's what we said we wanted. So it
That's
takes
super powerful
the
too.
the pressure goes down so much more because you knew that that's what you wanted.
Yeah.
It helps
Yeah,
the
when
team understand those difficult decisions.
Right. When your employees are starting to make decisions based on the core values and they're starting to remind the leadership team of the core values, that's when you know that the foundation is starting to get very strong, right? When they can also
Ab-
start repeating about the core purpose of the organization, you know the foundation is getting really strong. That's what you're searching for. And then all of the power that comes off of that is very aligned, very inspired, very focused, where now it just gets easy.
I'll share with you one of my stories on that. So Greg and Tammy, I'm not going to say their last name just yet, but they worked on their vivid vision. They got very clear about what they wanted, and then there was a pretty substantial investment in spreading out to a second franchise, a second location from San Antonio to Austin, and then buying a building. And you're talking about big numbers there. And there was a lot of pressure. There was a lot of stress in making those decisions. But they said, "This is what we said we wanted, right? It's here in our vivid vision that's what we
Yeah.
want to accomplish."
Yeah.
And I think we're actually a year ahead of the vivid vision because there was so much clarity and the team knew what needed to be done. So they were able to just follow through with it, right? So it's planning at a high level with a lot of clarity and direction, and it just helps everyone make great decisions.
It also helps the employees understand why we're saying no to certain decisions. Now they understand we're saying no because we're going in this direction, or no because it doesn't drive us, or no because there's another alternative that's better taking us there. They understand the clarity of our decision making. Whereas in the absence of that, all they hear is no, but they don't understand why. And then they get frustrated and they don't feel heard and they don't feel appreciated. Whereas if they were on the same page, they would be making the same decisions.
So it's the starting page of all pages, if you ask me, right? It's the
Totally.
where it all
Yeah.
starts. Cameron, you've got so many books, systems, contents, tools, but I want to give the audience something that you believe is like something very practical. They can all go back to their office, sit for a few minutes or hours and get done. I'm going to give you a second to think about it, or maybe you have like, no, it's very clear. It's go do that. What is like your number one, tool that you think, hey, go do this?
If you consider that for every company that I've built since 1989, I have 100% used the systems that are in my Invest in Your Leaders course. Every company. And there's not a single one of those systems that has been outdated because of technology or automation or AI. It's impossible to actually take any of those 12 systems and optimize or automate them because they're human-centered decisions. So it's training everyone who manages people in your company. It would be enrolling them and engaging them in that. It would be you as a leader and getting, your management team going through that course. It's $750 a person. It's a rounding error. I had a CEO one time who said, if I'm not willing to spend $750 on one of my managers to grow their skills, I should fire that person and hire somebody I will invest $750 in. I had another one said, well, what if I train them in your course and they quit? I said, what if you don't train them in my course and they stay?
Yep.
Right? What if they keep running your company on a day-to-day basis, doing it the same way, and they've been doing it wrong the whole time?
Yep. Or there's a much better way of doing it as well, and they just
Yeah.
don't know it exists.
Well, I talked to an entrepreneur about this a week ago, and I said, how much training have you had on doing interviews? He's hired 100 people. And he said, none, but I've hired 100 people. I said, maybe you've done it wrong every single time. And he went, oh shit. Like it never occurred to him that just because he's done it doesn't mean he was doing it right.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that's how, we as entrepreneurs, like, I could take my iPhone and it makes a great hammer, but that's not what it is. If somebody showed me I'd be like, oh, it's not a hammer. I had no idea. I thought I could just hammer things with it. That's not the purpose of that tool. But I think as entrepreneurs, we're often so busy that we forget about the upside of training and growing our people. We forget about the upside of aligning and inspiring people. And for Gen Y, it's one of the most important, the top two things Gen Y cares about is being aligned with the company's core values and core vision and core purpose so they're aligned with some greater mission. And number two is skill development. They want to continue to grow their skills in their day-to-day. So give them that, and then they stay.
Absolutely. I 100% believe in the importance of that. And I've been setting, budgets for a lot of my companies just for that purpose. actually making it part of the compensation package as well, where then they can get to choose what they want to train on and then
Yeah.
bring it back to the organization. Here's the one you hear all the time, and I'd love to hear your answer to that one, which is we're too busy, we don't have time. Things are happening fast, we're growing, we just don't have time. We'd love to, we just don't have time.
So the Invest in Your Leaders course, all 12 modules, takes a total of 5.5 hours for an individual self-guided on their own to learn 12 new skills. What I recommend that they do is every 3 months, they go through all 12 modules again. So it's a half a day every 3 months working on situational leadership, coaching, interviewing, running effective meetings, delegation, time management, project, like all the shit that we have to get better at for 5 hours a month. If you consider that a normal month is 120 hours, you're talking about less than 4% of your time on a 40-hour work week, right? It's a rounding error. Sorry, I'm way off on that. It's less than 1% of your time.
Okay.
That's
So
they still have 99% of the time to be busy.
I'm sold and I appreciate it, because many times we think that, hey, with just this little piece of advice, we're good, we're golden, we're done. But reality is that it's a process and it takes time and you need to develop it. And what
Yeah.
you're saying here is, yeah, and it doesn't take too much time. It just requires a little bit of time. So everybody's
Well,
is asking at this point, where
here's
do
the
I
other
find this program?
here's the other part of this as well is it's very, very easy to be average. Right, when we grew 1-800-GOT-JUNK, which I was the chief operating officer of 1-800-GOT-JUNK, I took them from 14 employees to 3,100 employees in 6 years, from 2 million in revenue to 106 million in revenue in 6 years. We gave up no debt. We had no, we gave up no equity. If you want to have growth like that, which is doubling your revenue 6 years in a row, then you grow your people. If you want to grow by 7 to 10% a year, then do what you're always doing. I'm good with that. Like average is really easy, right? But from going from good to great requires focusing on the critical few things versus the important many.
Excellent. Where can they find the course?
Yeah, it's at investinyourleaders.com.
Investinyourleaders.com, and we'll put that in the comment section. Okay, Cameron. So I'm going to try to do a quick summary of what we've talked about so far.
Okay.
And at the end, please, anything that I have missed or anything that I haven't asked you about that you'd like to share with us, I would really appreciate that. And then we'll start closing the podcast here today. So here I go. All right. This is going to be challenging because there was so many good things that you said. But it all started with Cubs and Scouts and understanding leadership and putting yourself. You were in a position of leaders where you were working with your peers and you had to influence them, but you had to influence them without necessarily, having that much authority. It was just influencing your peers. Student government, and then business when you were 20 years old. And it's, man, not from a position of authority. I mean, you mentioned that a couple of times. You have to influence them because you have a vision, an idea, a direction, guidance, support. And there's this thing that we continue to talk a lot about today, which is about the situational leadership and just becoming aware that you've got to be adapting consistent. There's no one right way. There's no one approach. And then you said situational leadership and conflict resolution are two critical skills. And that also showed up in our conversation quite a bit. I love the idea that we are all like 15-year-olds trapped in adult bodies. So we still want, need, crave what that 15-year-old wants, needs, and craves. So we want recognition, we want attention, we want praise, we want gratitude. And the big idea is that we need to recognize that we have a job because we have life expectations. We want to have a certain life, certain revenue or income, and be able to use it in certain ways. But we also have the realities of life. We all have problems. We all have people around us and family and issues and health issues and growing up issues. And it's important to have that empathy and recognition and understanding that that's happening. So we gotta recognize them as human beings with needs, and then they have challenges. So we've got to be celebrating the wins. And ultimately, as an organization, if we want to move away from being average and being great, how happy are our employees? And making employee net promoter score a critical measurement for your organization that just does not go away, and everybody understands and recognizes that it's always there. On that front, average is easy, right? There's a lot of companies that are average, but companies that are not average, they recognize it and they've always known and they haven't forgotten. Because I thought that the world had forgotten about the importance of people, but you said no. The 5 to 10% of great companies have never forgotten about that. It's everyone else that has.
Yep.
So then we talked a little bit more about the situational leadership, and you gave us a really good framework and a few really solid questions to ask, which is for every project, you've got to ask your team member, what is your skill level? What is your confidence? What is your commitment? And based on that, you can then adapt to your style and say, hey, do I need to tell this person? Do I need to explain why we're doing it or why we're doing it a certain way? Do I need to coach them, or do I just need to delegate, get out of their way, and let them handle it for every
Yep.
project, for every situation? So now everybody knows that, hey, I can't just coach everyone because not everyone wants coaching all the time. Don't tell everyone, and there's some situations where you just want to get out of the way, but some situations
Yep.
where you really can't get just away from them. Okay, we talked a lot about delegating, coaching on different projects. Then we talked about this idea of at different stages of your organization, your skills, where you invest your time and energy is going to evolve. And
Hmm.
some of the examples are, when you first start your business, you're doing a lot of the work yourself. Then you eventually hire some people, you start to delegating, and you got to get good at coaching them and managing projects. Then you've got your management team, you got to get much better at collaboration and building consensus, managing conflict. Then you got to be really good at metrics and priorities and developing your senior team. Continues to evolve to a leadership team and really helping those people really lead the organization. Eventually gets to, look, you're working on company politics and in the big framework and perspective of running a business, and you've got to be evolving your skill set. Your skill set today needs to evolve, otherwise you're going to get stuck. And that's something that was very clear. We talked a little bit about this idea of how do you get rid of people? How do you transition people that were good at some point but are just not a good fit going forward? Said first thing is hire self-driven learners, invest in their skill development, and hire the type of people that are excited to learn, excited to bring it to the table, and excited to think about how to execute it and get it done. Simple framework: 1% of your revenue, at least $750 per team member towards their development. Figure out what sort of training they need, what sort of support they need, and get them onto that. We talked about how do you actually execute it, and you said, hey, top grading, Jack Welch system, skills versus fit. Figure out who's an A player, right? Your racehorse, invest in them. Your B players are your workhorses, develop them. C players, I don't want to say it myself. You got to get rid of them. And there's two conversations. Someone there's not a good culture fit, they're out. Someone that's a good fit but not delivering on their metrics, you're just not delivering on the metrics conversation. And then the most difficult one, but it's only for the fastest growing companies, which is this approach of saying you are not who we're going to need. And then having this mindset of it's like you're firing your mother, your sister. So that, gives you a framework on how to do it. And then you talked to us a lot about the invest in your leaders program. I really believe that we have to do it. We've got to learn from people that are utilizing these tool system skills that are so critical, that have been battle tested and evergreen. And you've given us where we can see that. I know we're running a little bit short on time. So Cameron,
Yeah.
closing ideas, closing thoughts before I let you go.
Well, first off, you just summarized a lot of information in a very succinct way, which is fantastic. I don't know, were you using an AI tool for that, Otter, or like something or was that handwritten notes?
That was just my notes.
That's crazy. All right, I want to know what the AI tool is that can summarize a podcast interview down to that. I'm sure there is an AI tool, so if we can find out from somebody, that would be cool. The last part I'm going to leave people with, and yes, I have to jump into a meeting, is none of this stuff matters. This is just what we do to make money, and we're all walking each other home, that we're none of us are getting out of this alive. So we got to have some fun along the way and enjoy the journey and make sure that our employees do too.
So it's about enjoying the journey and living your best life, and
Because at the
recognizing
end of
that
the
at the end of the day, what's the saying, right? Like we're all in this sphere.
yeah, we're all just walking each other home. We're all like none of us are getting out of this alive, so we may as well enjoy the journey.
And
Not take
I want
ourselves
to
so
thank you so
seriously.
much for taking the time and really doubling down on this idea that it really is all about people. And with all the
You're
systems and
welcome.
frameworks and tools and knowledge and insight that you have, you really nailed down the idea that it's all about people and helping them. So thank you so much for your
You're
time
welcome.
today.
Max, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Cameron. Really appreciate it.
Okay.